When I was telling the story on my YouTube channel, a lot of people say that it's pretty inspirational. I get it, but also at that time, I did not feel like an inspiration. It was a really traumatic experience.
Hi guys, welcome to today's show. I have a special guest, Lisa, who runs popular YouTube channel Lisa Adulting in Singapore.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching.
Lisa, I brought you on board today because I realized you have a very unique story on how you had to learn about finances
Mm.
because of your family situation and stuff. So today I'll leave you to share a bit more on what you have discovered in your journey. But maybe the first question is, like if we were friends back in school days, 10 years
Mm.
ago, 15 years ago, in the secondary school canteen, who would Lisa be? Would Lisa still be someone who knows a lot about budgets and money or not?
No, no, 10 years ago, I would have been 17. So that would mean I was in JC. Honestly, in school, I feel like I'm a totally different person. But also in some areas, I'm still the same. I think personality-wise, I'm still very much a wallflower. Like you wouldn't, in fact, I don't even think you would have noticed me in the canteen because I wouldn't be in the canteen. I would be sitting in the classroom. Honestly, no, because I was always like, unfortunately, I was one of those kids where, you would be grouped into like you're either an arts kid or a maths kid, right? And I was grouped into the arts kid because my math and sciences were not very good. And I feel like it was more the way that it was taught than my own ability because I knew that if I put in the effort, I could do it. But because I was categorized as like an arts kid, then I always had the label on me that, I'm not a logical thinker, I'm an idealist. And those I think really shaped like my preferences also, which I don't think is true anymore. Like I think as I've grown up, I've become a lot more of a practical person, which is quite sad, but I think it's just part of maturing, right? And adapting to your situation. Yeah, 10 years ago, I think I would be amazed at how like what a different person I am now. And I don't know if we would have been friends back then. Yeah, we wouldn't be running in the same circles. Um, but yeah, I think growing up and changing is part of maturing. I would say the person I am now, I'm quite proud of how much I've grown
So
since
if I
then.
were to hear correctly, previously maybe you wouldn't be looking at budgets too much. You get an allowance
Definitely,
in and you kind of have a bit more free play, a
yeah,
bit less
definitely
structure.
not. Yeah, but there was one thing that I did though, even at 17, was that I was tracking my expenses, strangely enough, at 17. Because I had a scholarship at that age, like I got a scholarship at that age, and that meant getting, I think, $1,000 a year. So that was a lot of money for a 17-year-old, and it was money that didn't come from my parents, right? So for some reason, I just thought that I should be tracking how much I'm spending. And so I downloaded an app, the same app that I'm still using now, and I was tracking my expenses. And I was tracking because I wanted to know how much I had left to spend. Like it wasn't because I wanted to like manage my money. It was just so that I knew how much I had left to go and spend on things that I wanted to buy. But it was such a valuable habit. So I think even when I was younger, I had this instinct to sort of understand what I had and how I can manage that to like sort of make like the best decision that I could. Also, this idea of like managing what I had. I mean, also money was tight when I was growing up, and so I was aware that it wasn't something I could just splurge and forget.
Hmm.
Like if I needed to know how to use it properly, optimize it properly.
Just now you mentioned that you did arts
Mm.
instead of doing a math path. So what do you study in university days, and is it very different from what you're doing right now?
So I was in art stream all the way until JC, and then I went into communications, which is sort of related.
Hmm.
At 18, I feel like like you don't really know yourself. You've been in this like very structured curriculum all your life, and then suddenly you're asked to choose like a degree which you assume would be your career path, right? And so I joined communications because I thought that it was practical enough. Like at this age, it's like everybody's talking about practicality and whether you can get jobs, right? So I thought it was practical enough and also like artsy enough. So I wouldn't say like it was a very thoughtful decision. Although back then it was really the most thoughtful decision that I could have made with all the information I had. That was what I went into, and it taught me a lot of things. It taught me how to structure arguments, how to tell a story, how to be persuasive. Those soft skills are more what I got out of my degree at the end. And there were other things in university also. I think it's not just my degree that helped me, it's also all my electives. Like I was one of those students who were very serious about their electives. Like I knew like the stuff I wanted to take on the side. Because you have to take like a business course, a science course. Like those are the necessary electives you have to take. So I was very particular about which one I would do. And I think all that in combination helped me with like my subsequent with my jobs out of university. Like I just
Actually,
sorry,
just like you
let me
mentioned about communications, right? You know,
mm,
many a times audiences they see our videos and they
mm,
think, hey, how can someone deliver something 20, 30 minutes? A lot of
mm,
times we have to script it and we have
yes.
to do a storytelling. So I think that training in university days has probably shaped you to be able to create,
Mm,
a video script.
yeah, I'm grateful for that.
So what if we
Yeah.
talk about adulting from, graduation to right now? What is your definition of adulting and how has it changed?
Uh, it has definitely changed. When I was still in school, my idea of adulting was that it was more like an end goal, right? Like you would reach a point where you feel like you're an adult, and then adulting is less like a process than it is an end goal for me back then. And now I think after 4 years of working, my idea of it has changed completely in that it's definitely a process for me. I at 27 now, looking back when I was 17, looking at 27-year-olds, I would think that they had it all figured out. They knew what to do. They were proper adults. And now at 27, I don't feel that way at all. Sometimes I feel like I'm still 17 years old trying to figure out what to do. So I have accepted that adulting is really just continuously learning and bettering yourself, which is quite freeing because like I don't feel like I am now the best person I'll ever be. I know that I can keep getting better. And that's what I think adulting is.
So someone who is freshly graduated,
I don't think I'm that freshly graduated anymore.
3, 4 years.
Yeah.
I remember seeing you mention a term that not fresh graduate, one stage
Still
up.
graduates.
Still graduate. I thought that was
Yeah.
that was quite funny. Because we mentioned many a times fresh graduate, yet we don't define how many years is someone who is
Yeah.
fresh. That
Yeah.
supposedly doesn't know what to do with first paycheck, so wild away by it. No, but
Mm.
nowadays, yeah, 3, 4 years, you're definitely not fresh in that sense already.
Yeah. It does feel strange though, because I think the pandemic did take 2 years out of it.
Hmm.
So while I was working during the pandemic, those 2 years, I feel like they should be subtracted from my working experience. But I feel like a lot of people probably feel that way.
Mentioning about just graduating, I recall reading some of your things that you actually bought the house shortly after getting your first paycheck after graduating, right?
Yeah.
What was the story and what are, some of the fears that you had
Mm.
going to such a
Um,
big purchase?
yeah. It's a very long story. I have a video on my channel about it, but the gist of it is that the house that I was living in at the time with my family, it belonged to it was co-owned by my dad and my aunt, who is my dad's sister. But when my dad passed away, the ownership of the house went back to my aunt in full. So my family technically didn't have like ownership in the house anymore. Um, and then during the pandemic, I think our relationship soured a bit, and I felt like it was necessary for me to move my family out as soon as possible. Like we didn't feel very safe in the house anymore. Our mental health was in the ditches. Like it was very bad for me and my mom. My brother at the time had already moved out into another relative's place. So it was just me and my mother. But we were really not doing very well in the house. And so I had gotten this inheritance from I mean, I say inheritance, but it's just my father's CPF money that was given to us in a lump sum after his death. And just started looking for HDBs to buy. Like, and of course, I didn't think I had this idea, okay, I want to buy a HDB, but what does that entail, right? So in the next few months, I was researching, I was emailing HDB asking like how do I do this? This is my situation. Is it even possible for me to buy a house? So it's really a step-by-step process. And then eventually I was able to afford a 2-room HDB, and then I moved myself and my mother out, and we're now living in this house. And yeah, I was only 24 at the time. I think that happened in September. I started work in April, so it was 6 months
Hmm.
into my first job. It's not. easy. Like I don't see it. When I was telling the story on my YouTube channel, a lot of people say that it's pretty inspirational. And I get it, but also at that time I did not feel like an inspiration. It was a really traumatic experience.
You wanted to
Um
get out of
yeah,
that
like I didn't
situation
want
more.
I
It was forced to happen kind of a thing.
yeah. Yeah, so it was really only after after months after like it all sort of settled that I thought, okay, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to be learned and a lot that I had learned from the experience. But when I was going through it, it was really just like slogging through the entire process. And my biggest fear, I don't think, because it was such a stressful period, right? I don't think I really gave a name or a shape to the anxieties that I was feeling because I didn't have like the brain space for it. Basically, any free time that I had was consumed by thoughts about like, okay, what's the next step? What am I supposed to do now? For like almost 6 months, that was just all I was thinking about. And so I didn't really have time to sit down and think about what I was really scared of. Because what I was scared of was just that I would fail, I wouldn't get a house, we would be stuck in this
Mm.
um horrible situation for the rest of my life. Like I also felt a lot of responsibility because as the eldest child, like after my dad passed away, I felt like I was now the head of the household. And I didn't feel like the head of the household, but I had to play this role, right? So there was just a lot of pressure that I put on myself. It wasn't that people were expecting this from me, but I also put a lot of it on myself. Yeah, so it was tough in that respect. Because when you don't face your fears head on, they become this very like big and consuming thing, right? Like they become a lot scarier than they actually are. Yeah, so it was I hope it doesn't happen to anybody else. It's just
I'll
it
think that
yeah.
anyone buying a house would have, network of family to give advice,
Mm,
that they can, rely on. Unfortunately, it seems like you were left on an island. Luckily, HDB answered some of the questions that you have.
yeah. Yeah. They were not as helpful as I hoped they would be. Not that they weren't helpful, it's just that I was not eligible for a lot of the schemes. Um, so I did feel like I was left alone. My kind of personality is that if I'm faced with this kind of stressful situation, right, I tend to just over research, I over
Mm.
plan. Maybe there's no such thing as over researching, but I was really obsessive about how like my planning, my researching. I was doing it like for all my waking hours. And that's how I deal with with stressful situations. I tend to just plan for the worst case scenario, and that really helped because like I learned so much just from all the research that I did because of necessity, right? I wanted to know my situation as best I could so that I could make the best decisions. Um, and that has carried through with me even now, with a lot of other areas of my life.
When you purchased the property, it was directly from HDB or you bought resale, which means
It
you
was
need an agent.
Yes, I got a resale flat. So I had an agent and it's like a friend of a friend. So I messaged my financial advisor who gave me the contact of this real estate agent that she's friends with. And then I spoke to him and then I decided to like hire him as my agent. So getting his help was also very
Mm.
helpful. One thing I learned from this experience is that as much as I wanted to do everything myself, I couldn't really do everything myself. And so getting the help of an agent, an interior designer, those were valuable to me. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I was still doing a lot of it by myself. Like even getting the agent, getting the ID, it's all I have to go out and find what.
I remember seeing
Yeah.
you have new videos on the home renovation and stuff. So
Yeah.
actually, on the YouTube side, how was the journey and what motivated you also to start documenting some things that you've learned? Was it meant as a diary at the start and it just happened
Mm.
to take off, or what was the story?
Yes, I would agree with that. It started off kind of as a diary and it became bigger than I expected. But when I first had the thought of making a YouTube channel, I wanted to record my experiences. And it wasn't just like diaristic. I didn't just want to record my experience, but also I felt like there were the lessons that I learned, those were worth sharing. And so my very first video, which was about how I budget my salary, I felt like that was one of the first things I learned when I was on this adulting journey, right? That I felt perhaps was not intuitive to people. it's like I do want to make videos that are a bit duh, right? So I thought, okay, like maybe this is something that I could share because it could be useful to somebody. And that's what I started with. Um, and yeah, so there's the diaristic aspect, which I really am careful with also. Like I always want to like couch my 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 lessons in personal experience because this is what I had to do. This is my situation, and so this is what I had to do. It might not apply to you, the viewer, because your situation might be different. But I'm also the kind of person that learns from example. Like I learn by copying people, I learn by watching what they do. And that's how I learn. So I thought it would be useful to do the same for other people who perhaps also learn the same way, like watching how somebody else does it and then they can do it in their own way. So in a way, I was making a video for my past self also. Yeah,
Or
to
your younger brother, maybe. Would
if
he
he
be
if
in tune
he
with
if he
finances?
watches.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. He just started university, so I think he has a long way to go. When I was in first year of university, I was not even thinking about any of this. I think you learn different lessons at different phases of
Mm.
your life. So
So at the
yeah.
start of a journey, maybe who do you learn from? Any sources that comes to your mind? And right now,
Yeah,
has it changed or not?
yes, broadly it's been the same though. So when I started, it was a lot of the online resources. So Seedly was a huge inspiration. The Woke Salaryman also. Those two and a lot of online resources. So those two, the Financial Diet, they're mostly based in the US. Um, so at the beginning, I was consuming a lot of like online resources. Over the years, this year especially, I'm trying to get into books more, like
Mm,
reading full-length books about financial planning, about investing. I think when you're starting out, right, like short form or like short blog posts are really like the best way because it's very condensed information, very actionable. It can be quite intimidating to read like a 300-page book at the beginning. But now that I have a more stable foundation of knowledge, I feel like I can sit through like a 300-page book more readily than I was back then. So yeah, I really credit everything that I've learned from these online resources, the people who make this information available. Yeah, and the landscape has changed so much also. I think there's a
mm.
lot more resources now, a lot more people sharing about their finances online. So it's just gotten better, I feel. It was pretty good when I started, thankfully, because I know like the people before me, they didn't have
Mm.
as much as I had. And I think I had pretty much when I had quite a lot when I started. Now there's even more. So the struggle now would be to find reputable people and like people that you trust and can give like reasonable and good advice.
So at this stage, right now, if I were to check correctly, you're looking more in terms of understanding retirement and investments. The
Yes.
adulting journey has started from how to do budgeting, all the way
Mm,
to buying a first house, knowing rules in housing market and stuff, what kind
mm,
of capital, to now you've settled now how to build for the future.
yes. Yeah.
Correct. So
Yeah.
what are things that you've most recently picked up, maybe in that space of retirement or investing?
I've been investing even ever since I started the whole budgeting thing, but in very little, very small amounts and always in robo advisors because it's like a passive method. And when you're starting out, right, when you only have $100 a month to put into investments, I think it's very stressful to like be looking into stocks, like picking stocks, being like trying to be active about it. So I was just putting it in robo advisors and I told myself that like it's just a small amount of money. I'm not gonna like take it out in the next,
Hmm.
hopefully, I'm not gonna take it out in the next decade or so. Like it's really gonna be for decades and decades. And so I accepted that fact that I perhaps will not see this money ever again. Best case scenario is I will see it when I retire. That's how I started. And I am glad that I did that because then I got started on my investing journey, even if I wasn't like 100% clear on what exactly I was doing, what investing really is. It was a bit of a risk, but I had a base knowledge already. Like it wasn't like I was investing in all crypto, hoping for the best. I felt like I was investing in something very boring and tested and like tried and tested. And then from there, like once you have that base understanding, you just sort of keep growing your knowledge, right? So that's where I am right now. I'm just expanding my understanding of investing, what it means, how to do like perhaps in impactful investing, like looking into ESGs, what counts as an ESG fund, how do I like invest in things that I believe in, like companies that are doing good work. So like going more in detail. And I think with like before, even 2 years ago, I didn't want to look too much into it because I felt like there were other things that were that were more urgent on my plate, like building my emergency fund, um, building my like increasing my earning power, like that was what I was focusing on at the time. Then now, when I feel slightly more stable, like this is where I want to increase my knowledge, and I think retirement will come soon after. It's a bit hard to imagine the concept of retirement for me now at 27. Like I don't, it's such a far away concept for me. But yeah, I'm excited. I think it's the excitement of knowing that there is this whole world that I have yet to like step into and learn about. And so this year that is where my focus is, like trying to understand why I'm investing, and that why is like financial independence, what I'm gonna do when I'm older, how do I want to age well, what resources do I need to age well. There's this somebody in my YouTube comments, right, in that I think that video about when I talked about wanting to learn more about retirement and investing. It was a beautiful comment. She said something like, retirement is a philosophical question, but the how of it is a mathematical question. So it sounds like, because at first I was struggling with the idea of like only thinking about the money aspect of retirement. But in order to achieve like the retirement life that I want, I need the resources to do it. So it's equally as important to consider building the resources you have alongside like the philosophical questions of like how you want to retire, how you want to live your life. So
So
I'm
at
trying to
current
keep those two
moment,
things in mind. Yeah.
how much budget do you set for retirement, and is there a target that you have in mind?
Honestly, not yet. Like target, like a specific number, I haven't come to that point where I have this number in mind. So as I'm learning, I'm putting aside money, and that is currently uh
Yeah, maybe
about
how much you could share also from a
uh
ratio perspective or from a
ratio, it's about 25% of my salary
okay.
that I'm putting aside into long-term investments. So that's money that I am not expecting to see until I have to retire. Like that could be at 40, that could be at 60. But as I'm learning, I'm also putting aside that money because I don't want to like not put aside anything until I feel ready to do so. Then I think there's like opportunity cost of not being in the market, right? So I am putting aside as I'm learning.
Understand. You mentioned before something of a 4-1-2-1-2
Mm,
budget formula also. Do you
yeah.
still stick with it?
Yeah.
And who would it apply the best for, looking back at your journey?
Yes, I still do the 4-1-2-1-2. Do I have to explain? Should I
Oh, you could,
explain
go ahead. Yeah, because
yeah, it's
some may not have seen it yet.
yeah, it's a budgeting framework where you put it's a way of allocating your income by percentages into different goals. So there's the 4-1-2-1-2, there's the 5-3-2. It's just a different way of like allocating percentages into different categories. So for myself, I aim to put 40% into fixed expenses, 10% into insurance. This is how I do it, like, but it might be different depending on like who you refer to. I put 10% into my personal like fun spending, like anything that I want to spend for myself. 20% into savings and 20% into investments. But I try to like stretch the percentages.
Mm.
I adjust according to like how much I spend that month. So for now, I put 25% into investments and 25% into savings. So actually half my salary is like to some kind of savings, whether it's a
Mm.
short-term saving or a long-term saving. I think it's great for people starting out with their first job because typically your salary would be about the between like 2K to 4K range. And I think that's a good starting salary to put in this like 4-1-2-1-2 framework because you would spend about half your salary on expenses, maybe. It really depends from person to person, depends what your salary is, depends what your obligations are. It's a way for you to like put a framework around something that can be very overwhelming. Like you get this huge paycheck in your bank account. Now what do you do with it? Right? It's like it can be very overwhelming. So having a framework makes it manageable, gives you somewhat of an idea about how to allocate it in a meaningful and thoughtful way. So I'm a huge fan of it. I really think it's one of the things that have changed my life and how I approach my finances. like being very systematic and thoughtful about how you divide up your resources.
So in this formula, there's one that goes towards emergency savings.
Can be, yeah, it
Can
would
be, right?
be, yeah, can be. It can be
Okay.
under the savings portion.
Okay. So now that you've hit your emergency savings goals already,
Mm.
you'll be moving them to the investment pot. Or how do you look at it differently right now at this
Um,
stage?
once I once I completed my emergency savings, now I'm dividing the savings up into short-term goals. So
Mm,
for instance, holiday, like I have a savings pot just for holidays. I want to like go on the holiday guilt-free because I know that I already saved up for it. I also have a pot of money for my family. I call it my family fund, and that is like it's almost like a secondary emergency fund for like less emergencies. Like maybe it's like
mm,
I want to bring my family. I need to like replace the washing machine or something. Like
mm,
anything to do with my family, uh I will take from that pot of money. But also it's something that I'm growing because I am considering in the future, maybe 5 years from now, upgrading our flat to a three
mm.
room. And that requires money to renovate, to like pay all the fees. So that I'm also building that in the hopes of being able to upgrade my home in the future. Yeah. So once I completed my emergency fund, I try to allocate my short-term savings to more short-term goals, like saving up for those as well.
Maybe as a last question to round things up, looking back at your journey, you stepped into a sole breadwinner position, right? Suddenly, maybe in that
Mm,
sense. Then you had to learn about finances. That's what I've heard in this whole discussion. Then eventually you build up your emergency savings, and now you're at a better place where it's all long-term planning, way better.
yes.
So if you had to look back at the journey and advise someone trust into this position that you found yourself in, what would you, what's the best tip that you have, as well as what's the biggest regret?
It's hard to say because everybody's situation is different, right? My biggest regret would be maybe not seeking more help
Mm,
because I felt like I was so in my own head about the specifics of like everything that was happening to me, right? That and I felt like nobody can understand my situation. Nobody else that I know is in my situation. So I did feel very alone. But when I made that video about how I got my flat, there were a lot of people in the comments who told me that they were in a similar situation.
mm,
Like they felt they want to move out of their current place, or like they also have not very good relationship with their family. So there are many people who are going through the same things. It's just that you don't know them. I isolated myself because I thought nobody else was going through what I went through. But if I had been more proactive in seeking help, I think it would have made my life a lot easier. It would have made my burden a lot lighter. So if you're able to get out of that headspace and like be vulnerable and try to find help,
mm.
it could be like from a social worker or like somebody in your community, somebody in your circle of friends. That would be very helpful. You don't have to do everything alone, is the lesson here. Yeah, that's what I would say. Thought about something else also. I think putting it like being clear about what exactly is required from you. For instance, when I was buying the house, right? No, sorry, when I was graduating, before like the house stuff even came up, and I had this title of like head of household put upon me, that's a very vague term, right? I don't know
Mm.
what that exactly entailed, and it could mean nothing, and it could also mean everything. Like I dedicate my entire life to supporting my family. But oftentimes it's not that. Like maybe it's like what exactly is required from you. So is it like you pay the bills for your family, like you help support your family by paying the utility bills? Is it paying your parents' mortgage? Are you responsible for the household expenses? So putting some parameters would make it feel more approachable. You understand like what are the limits of what you can do,
Mm.
what kind of help is required from you. And then from there, like try to carve out space for yourself to think about what your own goals and your dreams are. Because there's this maybe I'm worried that there's this tendency to just devote your entire life to serving somebody else that you don't really think about what you want as an individual. Like making it clear for yourself what is required from you for others, and then carving out space to think about your own life and what direction you want to go to. And that's what I'm putting into practice also. Like I cannot manage my entire family and my entire family's life, right? Like I'm responsible to take care of them, but I'm not responsible for their actions, their behaviors. Yes, understanding my limits and then also making space to think about myself and what I want to do.
You know, when you mentioned that, I suddenly thought of single parents who devote all their attention towards their kids
Mm,
and they kind of neglect, their own growth or their own future. So, everybody's circumstance is different. And it is very true. Once you start getting into that hole too deep, then you don't prioritize some of your own
mm.
happiness. And that shouldn't be the way. There should be a balance for things.
Yeah, I agree.
So thank you so much, Lisa, for joining and sharing with all of us today. And
Thank you, Josh, for listening to my long rambles.
for anyone keen to listen, and learn from Lisa, I'll leave links below to her channel. Thank you so much, Lisa. I'll invite you again for a
Thank you,
future episode.
Josh.
Take
Thank you,
care and
Josh.
see you all. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.